I have a studio in Berlin. Let me cue on here, which is down there in the snow just last weekend. In this studio, we do a lot of experiments. I would consider the studio more like a laboratory. I have occasional meetings with scientists, and I have an academy, a part of the university in Berlin. We have an annual gathering of people, and that is called Life in Space. So Life in Space is really about not necessarily how we do things, but why we do things. Do you mind looking with me in that little cross in the center there? So just keep looking, don't mind me. See, you'll have a yellow circle, and we'll do an after image experiment. When the circle goes away, you will have another color, the complementary color. I'm saying something, and your eyes and your brain is saying something back. This whole idea of sharing, the whole idea of constituting reality by overlapping what I say and what you say. Think of a movie. Since 2 years now, with some stipends from the Science Ministry in Berlin, I've been working on these films where we produce the film together. I don't necessarily think the film is so interesting. Obviously, this is not interesting at all in the sense of the narrative, but nevertheless, what the potential is, and just keep looking there, what the potential is, obviously, is to kind of move the border of who's the author and who's the kind of receiver, who's the consumer, if you want, and who has the responsibility for what one sees. I think there is a socializing dimension in kind of moving that border. Who decides what reality is? This is the Tate Modern in London. The show that was in a sense about that. It was about a space in which I put half a semicircle of a yellow disc. I put a mirror in the ceiling and some fog, some haze. And the whole idea obviously was to make the space tangible. With such a big space, the problem is obviously there is a kind of discrepancy between what your body can sort of embrace and what the space in that sense is. So here I had a hope that I would, by inserting some natural elements, if you want, some fog, I could make the space tangible. And what happened is that people, they start to see themselves in the space. So look at this, look at the girl. Of course, they have to look through a bloody camera in a museum, right? That's how museums are working today. But look at her face there as she's checking out, looking at herself in the mirror. Oh, that was my foot there. She wasn't really sure whether she was seeing herself or not. And I guess in that whole idea, how do we configure the relationship between our body and the space? How do we then reconfigure it? How do we know that being in a space makes a difference? Do you see that when I said in the beginning it's about why rather than how? The why meant really what consequences does it have when I take a step? What does it matter? Does it matter if I am in the world or not? And does it matter whether the kind of actions I take filters into a sense of responsibility? Is art about that? And I would say yes. It is obviously about not just decorating the world and making it look even better or even worse, if you ask me. It's obviously about also taking responsibility, like I did here when throwing some green dye in the river in LA, Stockholm, Norway, and Tokyo. Among other places, the green dye is not environmentally dangerous, but it obviously looks really rather frightening, and it's on one side, on the other side also, I think, quite beautiful, as it somehow shows the turbulence in these kind of downtown areas in these different places of the world. The Green River, as a kind of activist, not a part of an exhibition, idea was really about showing people in this city as they walk by that a space has dimensions, a space has time, and the water flows through the city with time. The water has a kind of ability to make the city negotiable, tangible. Negotiable meaning that it makes a difference whether you do something or not. It makes a difference whether you say, I'm a part of the city, and if I vote, it makes a difference. If I take a stand, it makes a difference. So this whole idea of the picture, a city not being a picture, I think is something that art, in a sense, always was working with. The whole idea that art can actually evaluate the relationship between what does it mean to be in a picture, what does it mean to be in a space, and what's the difference between thinking and doing. So these are different experiments on that. I won't go into them. Iceland, lower right corner, my favorite place. These kind of experiments, they filter into architectural models. These are ongoing experiments. One is an experiment I did for BMW, an attempt to make a car. It's made out of ice, a crystalline stackable principle in the center on the top, which I'm trying to turn into a concert hall in Iceland, a sort of a run track or a walk track on the top of a museum in Denmark, which is a glass, colored glass, going around. So the movement with your legs will change the color of your horizon. And last summer at the Hyde Park in London with the Serpentine Gallery, a kind of a temporal pavilion where moving was the only way you could see the pavilion. This summer in New York, there is one thing about falling water which is very much about the time it takes for water to fall. It's quite simple and fundamental. I have walked a lot in the mountains in Iceland, and as you come to a new valley, as you come to a new landscape, you have a view. And if you stand still, the landscape doesn't necessarily tell how big it is, or doesn't tell you really what you're looking at. The moment you start to move, the mountain starts to move. The big mountains far away, they move less. The small mountains in the front, they move more. And if you stop again and you wonder, is that a 1 hour valley, or is that a 3 hour hike, or is that a whole day I'm looking at? If you have a waterfall in there, right out there at the horizon, you look at the waterfall and you go, oh, the water is falling like really slow. And you go, my God, it's really far away and it's a giant waterfall. If the waterfall is falling faster, it's a smaller waterfall which is closer by, because the speed of falling water is pretty constant everywhere, and your body somehow knows that. So this means a waterfall is a way of measuring space. Of course, being an iconic city like New York, who has kind of had an interest in somehow playing around with the sense of space, you could say. It wants to seem as big as possible, obviously. Adding a measurement to that is interesting, in the sense the falling water suddenly gives you a sense of, oh, Brooklyn is exactly this much. The distance between Brooklyn and Manhattan, in this case the Lower East River, is this big. So it was not just necessarily about putting nature into the city, it's also giving the city a sense of dimension. And why would we want to do that? Because I think it makes a difference whether you have a body which feels a part of a space, rather than having a body which is just in front of a picture. And haha, there's a picture and here's I, and what does it matter? Is there a sense of consequences? So if I have a sense of the space, if I feel that the space is tangible, if I feel there is time, if there's a kind of dimension I could call time, I also feel that I can change the space. And suddenly it makes a difference in terms of making space accessible. One could say this is about community, collectivity. It's about the sense of being together. How do we create public space? What does the word public means today anyway, right? So art in that way, I think, addresses great things about parliamentary ideas, democracy, public space, being together, being individual. How do we create an idea which is both tolerant to individuality and also to collectivity, without polarizing the two into two different opposites? Of course, the political somehow agenda in the world has been very obsessed polarizing the two against each other in different very normative ideas. And I would claim that art and culture, and this is why art and culture is so incredibly interesting in the times we're living in now, has proven that one can create a kind of a space which is both sensitive to individuality and to collectivity. It's very much about this causality, consequences. It's very much about the way we link thinking and doing. So what's between thinking and doing? And right in between thinking and doing, I would say there is experience. And experience is not just, kind of entertainment in this sort of non-causal way. Experience is about responsibility. Having an experience is taking part in the world. Taking part in the world is really about sharing responsibility. So art in that sense, I think, hold incredible relevance in the world in which we're moving into, particularly right now. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.